What is up, my beautiful gemstones? Welcome back to my channel, and if you're new here, just welcome. My name is Gemma Jade, but today we are going to be discussing more high strangeness, possibly involving ETs. I recently covered more about the alien hybrids here on this channel, and it's a subject that I kind of just can't get enough of, if I'm being honest. I wonder so much how many people are out there who aren't really people at all, but who are some sort of extraterrestrial, either projecting themselves as human beings or who have taken on human form some other way or by some other means. I'm sure there are many of you out there who have had a strange encounter with a person who you didn't know, or maybe even with someone who you knew well, that made you really start to consider whether or not you had been dealing with a human being at all. That's not just me, right? I mean, we've all had those encounters, right? I mean, I think that moments and encounters like that are common in this community, and I came across an interesting experience a man had with some neighbors that made me want to look more into this type of situation, and I thought that all of you would just kind of like to come along for the ride. I then followed up this account with some reports that I lifted directly from the National UFO Reporting Center, and I wanted to discuss the very short reports with all of you, there are 11 in total, and then tell you what I think about each and every one of those reports and ask what your opinions are about whether or not they're legitimate experiences with extraterrestrials. I think after hearing this story, many of you might reconsider your relationship with your own neighbors, perhaps wondering if they're really so bad to live near after all. Let's have some fun and jump right in. In the fall of 2010, a man who we will call Mark was living in what he described as a rundown apartment complex in New York City. He had a roommate who traveled a lot for work, and he was left alone in the apartment for a majority of the time he lived there. Mark explained that the turnover rate was high in the complex because of how much of a dump it was, and so he was used to seeing people moving in and out and coming and going all of the time. It was for that reason, when he saw that someone new had moved into the apartment across the hall from him, he didn't really think anything of it at first. However, in keeping in line with the title of this video, he was about to experience some real high strangeness regarding the people who moved in across the hall from him very soon after they took up residence there. The new tenant, whose name neither Mark nor anyone else ever really learned, will be called Jeff for the purposes of this video, and it didn't take long for Mark to notice that Jeff was an eccentric and a recluse, which honestly isn't too odd in the city nowadays and probably wasn't the epitome of strangeness back almost 14 years ago either. Jeff was almost never seen by anyone else in the building, according to Mark, and he almost never left his rundown apartment at all. As far as the other neighbors were concerned, the man never exchanged pleasantries or spoke at all to any of the other people in the building either, even when they would, on the rare occasion, see him and try to be friendly or strike up some sort of mundane conversation. Jeff was said to either very quickly leave the area without explanation or returning any of the conversations being aimed at him, like he would just turn and run off, but that he would also sometimes just stop and stand perfectly still while people were speaking to him, staring off into space and barely even breathing until the other person stopped talking, and then Jeff would run off again without responding at all to whatever had been said to him at the time. Jeff left the television on in his apartment at all hours of the day and night, and most of the time it was loud. Mark also noticed the endless procession of delivery people going up to the door to bring him his meals. This was odd in and of itself because this was a very poor neighborhood, and if the man never left his house, then it left Mark wondering how he made his money, that he was able to afford all of the expensive takeout for every meal, every day, all day long. Though the apartment was run down and somewhat dreadful to live in, Mark said that it's still in the heart of New York City, and he wondered how Jeff was able to afford to live there when all he seemed to do was sit around all day listening to the TV and ordering takeout food for himself. Not long after he moved in, it seemed like Jeff had someone else move in with him as well, and Mark described her as an Asian-looking woman who was young and every single bit as odd and weird as Jeff seemed to be. One day, he met the woman in the hallway and just said hello to her. She just stopped short in her tracks and stared straight at him unblinkingly. When he repeated his hello, she merely responded in a strange and somewhat robotic tone, possibly a mock Asian accent, according to Mark, quote, "I stay here." end quote, as she pointed to the door to Jeff's apartment. Mark didn't know what else to do, and so he just walked away and went about his business with a polite nod, and when he turned around, he saw that the woman was still standing perfectly still and staring at him, watching him walk away, unblinkingly, before turning and walking into Jeff's apartment. She slammed the door loudly behind her, but he figured maybe they were just your typical unfriendly New York City neighbors. That sentiment would quickly change as he realized that maybe something more sinister was going on with his new neighbors after all. A few weeks after the initial encounter with the woman, Mark's roommate came back from another out-of-town business trip and said he had some interesting news about their new neighbors from an encounter a friend of his who worked as a pizza delivery man had with the mysterious couple a few weeks earlier. The roommate said that his friend told him that when Jeff answered the door, he grabbed the pizza and slammed the money into the guy's hands, then trying to slam the door shut in his face without saying anything to him. The guy took a step forward to thank him for the generous tip, but said that it was like Jeff was trying very hard not to let the delivery guy see into the very darkened apartment. Suddenly, the Asian-looking woman came out of the darkness out of nowhere, and when she saw the delivery guy at the door, she stopped short, turned, and ran out of sight. The two men, meaning Mark and his roommate, tried to figure out why the couple was so weird. They speculated as to what they could possibly be hiding or doing in the apartment, but they couldn't come up with anything, and so they almost forgot about it, or at the very least didn't trouble themselves with thinking about it anymore. One night, Mark was coming home from going out to dinner with some friends in the city, and he just happened to run into Jeff and the woman in the hallway as they were heading into their apartment at the exact same time. Mark said that he said hello, but must have startled the couple because the woman dropped a whole bag of groceries on the floor in response to his cheerful hello. He said every single item that was in the bag and that had fallen onto the floor was canned meat. And when he apologized and tried to help the strange woman pick it all up, Jeff practically commanded him in a very agitated and angry voice to, quote, back up, leave it alone, leave it, end quote. He said Jeff had practically growled those things at him. He stopped and looked up as Jeff started muttering some sort of a silent, kind of quiet apology. And when he did, he saw that Jeff's eyes were different than they had been just seconds before or at any other time he remembered seeing him or the woman, because her eyes changed as well. While the woman usually had gorgeous and somewhat atypical for Asian women at least green eyes, and Jeff's eyes had been a beautiful and clear sky blue color, they both at that moment had eyes all black. They were all black, just like we think of when we imagine the black-eyed kids, like that. Their eyes had no whites left in them and no color, and reminded Mark of the predatory eyes of a shark. It startled our witness to the point that he physically recoiled in horror and tried to suppress the loud gasp that came out of his mouth, and he started backing away towards his apartment door while stuttering out an apology of his own and trying not to look anywhere but at the ground. He couldn't help but look up, though, as he was backing away, and by the time he reached his door, he had backed up into it. Both Jeff's and the woman's eyes had morphed right before his eyes back to their normal, albeit a little bit unusual colors. The couple rushed into their apartment so quickly that they left a lot of the canned meat that they had dropped right there in the hallway on the ground there. They slammed their door loudly behind them, and only then did Mark feel safe enough to turn his back and go into his apartment. He was thinking about it and decided he should at least pick up the rest of the groceries for them, feeling less scared and somewhat bad about the whole interaction to begin with. I just want to say here, guys, that as human beings, we have a tendency to do this, and I think it really plays well into the advantage of entities that mean us harm or that aren't from this realm or dimension, as they probably know us well enough to know that we will absolutely do everything we possibly can to try and talk sense into ourselves and convince ourselves that we didn't, in fact, see something, what we just know we saw, even if only moments earlier. Our minds work in such a way that if something is too terrifying or too abnormal, we tend to make every effort we can, even leaning into the preposterous, to convince ourselves that everything is just fine and perfectly normal, when we know deep down inside things aren't. I am sure that is what happened to our witness when only moments later he regretted the whole encounter, and instead of being scared out of his mind, he decided to go out and pick up that meat for that strange couple, despite what he had just witnessed with his own eyes only moments earlier. He didn't even get the chance to close his door yet before he decided to go pick the cans of meat up off the floor, but when he turned around, they were gone already. Obviously, Mark was really unsettled because not only had he seen what he had just seen, He knew the meat was there one moment and gone the very next too. He didn't understand what could possibly have been going on, but did the best he could to just put it out of his mind, right? To just forget about it. He made plans for that November, so about a month and a half later, to go and spend Thanksgiving with some friends so that he wouldn't be home alone for the week. When he got home from this week-long Thanksgiving break thing that he went on, he immediately realized that the television wasn't on all the time anymore, nor was it blaring when it was on in Jeff's apartment. He also noticed very quickly that the endless procession of delivery drivers had ceased altogether. He secretly hoped that Jeff and the lady had moved out, and when he talked to the landlord, it turns out he would get his wish. The landlord complained that they had moved out in the middle of the night and bailed on rent that they owed. It wasn't quite over just yet, though, and Mark said that after Jeff moved out, he began to have some strange and bizarre psychological issues or effects, maybe from the encounter. He started feeling claustrophobic in the apartment, which he had never felt before, and he didn't understand where it was coming from. Not only that, but he had a strange aversion to meat all of the sudden as well. Never having been a vegetarian or vegan before, nor had he ever considered it even, he found that he was absolutely repulsed by the thought of meat and couldn't even be near it to smell it without vomiting. He tried nibbling on some chicken, but became sick for days and says that he still isn't able to eat meat without being sick for days or even weeks afterwards, and it's almost 11 years later. Interestingly enough, Mark has convinced himself that Jeff and the woman weren't only entities that weren't human, but that they had either purposefully cursed him or he had inadvertently been cursed when he looked directly into their black eyes during that hallway encounter with the canned meat. Shortly after all of this happened, a little after the new year, he moved to Boston and tried to put the whole ordeal behind him. He was doing well, but then ran into a paranormal investigator, and David Weatherly, of all people, known by many for his books on the black-eyed kid phenomenon, while at a conference of some sort, and he ended up telling them his story. David believed in it so much that he ended up putting it in his book called Strange Intruders, but honestly, guys, this one is very hard to categorize because there's still far too many unknowns to it, at least in my opinion. Were they extraterrestrials or were they something different altogether? Were they regular human beings who were just a little odd? But if you believe that, then you can't believe Mark's whole story, because then how would their eyes have changed like that back and forth right before his very eyes? I believe Mark, and I believe in his story mainly because I know for a fact that things like this do happen, but that most of the time it's a one-off and doesn't have such intense consequences as Mark's experiences with these people had. The forced vegetarianism, the crippling claustrophobia. But then, what were they then? If they were aliens, then what kind were they and why are they here? Where did they go and what does that mean for the black-eyed kid phenomenon? There's just too many open-ended questions here for me to be able to even make an educated guess at what in the world this guy experienced, but I will say it was paranormal, or at the very least, that it was otherworldly in nature. Please let me know what you all think in the comments below, please. If you have had any similar experiences, do not leave them in the comments though, but email them to me for my next Listener Encounters video, which is coming for members very soon, and for everyone else in February at the absolute latest. With that being all I know and all that I could find on this particular case, but as usual, not wanting to leave you all hanging with a very short video, let's move on to some other strange occurrences that have happened to people that have many wondering if they had in fact experienced some type of phenomenon having to do with extraterrestrials or something like that. As I said in the beginning, all of these reports come from the National UFO Reporting Center, and some of them are very far out there indeed. So, the National UFO Reporting Center, or NUFORC, was founded in 1974, and its purpose was to serve as a place where people could call in the hotline and report possible extraterrestrial encounters or activity in a non-judgmental atmosphere. It was really for any potential otherworldly experiences you might have had, and the online archives had thousands upon thousands of stories that ranged from obvious contact with extraterrestrials all the way to some questionable, unexplained phenomenon. The thing about NUFORC is that they don't question the alleged witnesses for the most part, but they also don't really speculate at all about what the phenomenon or whatever it was could have been. It's a bit frustrating for truth seekers, but I'm sure that it was a godsend back when it first came out for people who were struggling and didn't know what in the world was going on or where to go with the information and or encounters that they had. So, in the interest of adding some more high strangeness onto this video, let's take a look at some of the cases I plucked out of the NUFORC archives and see if we can get into some theories and speculations about them on our own. NUFORC insists that it encourages healthy skepticism of the events and accounts found on their site, and I have to say, I agree with them. So let's see what we've got here and what we can come up with between us. Our first event reportedly happened in 1969 when a young Air Force veteran took a weekend trip to Boulder, Colorado, and as he laid there in his bed, his room suddenly went completely dark. He said the darkened room was followed by, quote, a sudden bright flash of light, end of quote. Nothing came out of the strange and unexpected event until the next morning. When he woke up, he noticed that his hair, which was the standard military length for the time of about a half an inch short, had grown almost 2 inches. As he slept there overnight. When he got back to home base in Aurora, Colorado, his roommate was, quote, totally freaking out about it, end of quote, according to him. He explained to the roommate what had happened and said, quote, he wasn't sure what to think of my story, but he did realize there was glaring physical evidence, end quote. The witness speculated in the report that he thought that he had been abducted because he didn't remember anything from the darkness to the flash of light, and then nothing until the next morning when he woke up and his hair had grown. The airman also speculated that he had been taken to a place where time passes more quickly than it does here on Earth. He said, quote, I still have trouble remembering things as it has always been very foggy since that time, end of quote. So I guess what he meant was that it affected his memory, but whether it affected the memory of the incident or his memory as a whole ever since the incident wasn't really explained. So what do you guys think about this one? I think the airman's speculation is more than likely somewhere around what more than likely probably happened. I believe there's a major thing that happens during these blackout abductions that a lot of people glance or gloss right over, and that's that as human beings, we all have very sharp intuition. Whether we believe we do or whether or not we use the intuition is a different story, but the abilities are there. And normally when I see an event like this, I'm inclined to listen to what the witness thinks might have happened to them, because I found that a lot of the time it's their instincts that are kicking in and telling them what they're saying is right. It feels right to them. I'm sure there's more to all of it than just those things, but I feel like that's a great start, right? It didn't escape my notice either that it's someone from the United States military that got abducted, or at the very least encountered some high strangeness involving something otherworldly, as that happens far more often than anyone else seems willing to admit. On a calm and clear summer night in 1971, 2 teenage girls who were best friends snuck out of their respective homes in Sunnyvale, California, and went for a late-night walk together. It doesn't specify what exactly they were doing, but they snuck out and met up no less. For the first hour or so, everything seemed perfectly normal and totally fine, and they were just walking along and talking about whatever teenage girls talked about in 1971. However, everything suddenly went completely silent, even the air itself, and the girls looked up and saw a 20 to 30 foot long flying ship that was hovering there just above the streetlights. The witness said it was, quote, probably about a good 5-minute walk ahead of us, end of quote. So that was the description of the distance from the ship to the girls, as one of the girls was the one who wrote in as the witness and reported this. The girls watched in awe and with tremendous fear as the ship bobbed up and down, seeming to be taking stock of and surveying them before it silently glided along, still bobbing up and down, and disappeared behind some nearby apartment buildings. The witness said, quote, it had these great enormous arms on the side that slowly swiveled around, and they had lines on the ends like ropes, but they weren't ropes, end quote. The ship didn't make any noise and it didn't light up. Both girls described it looking more like it were made of wood than of metal, and though the girls couldn't see what was inside of the ship, one of them insisted that she instinctively knew that it was, quote, collecting things, end quote. The girls turned and ran, both terrified beyond words, and as soon as they did so, the ship reappeared and seemed to shift so that its focus was solely on the 2 of them. Once they got to the one girl's house, they either got caught sneaking in or just didn't care, because the next thing in the report is about how the 2 of them tried in vain to convince the girl's father that they had seen something strange. They knew they had just seen something extraordinary, but the girl said, quote, he dismissed it and said it was probably just a weather balloon, but if I am sure of anything, it's that thing wasn't a weather balloon, end quote. That's insane, and also about the father, it's completely and totally disappointing. I say all the time, guys, we need to listen better to our children when they tell us they've seen or are seeing something. It's no longer cool or okay to just dismiss your kids' words or even their fears because of how ridiculous or improbable it might seem to you, an adult who knows better. Kids most of the time know what they're talking about no matter how old they are, and especially if it's something they're afraid of, it's time to buck up and pay attention. Luckily, the girls were unharmed as far as anyone knows, and they went on to live normal lives. But what if they didn't outrun that ship? What if they had been abducted and subjected to even just some of the tortures abductees almost always end up reporting at one time or another? In 1975, two friends were driving around some country backroads in LaFontaine, Indiana, after an evening fishing trip. It was dark outside and they had just had a great day hanging out, fishing, and shooting the breeze. They drove about a quarter of a mile away from where they had spent the day, and that's when things started to get really weird. They saw a flying disc, quote, with white lights revolving around it, end quote, and it just appeared out of nowhere, and it gradually lowered itself towards the ground until it was hidden behind a nearby house. So they decided to follow the craft behind the house, but instead of the craft, all they found were cows running wild all around, seeming to be completely dumbfounded and terrified and moving like crazy for seemingly no reason. The cows were so frightened and discombobulated that they tore right through an electric fence that was there in order to keep them inside and penned up within it. A neighbor came by after hearing all of the ruckus caused by the cows, and the witness said, quote, he asked if we knew what happened because cows just don't break down an electric fence for nothing. We didn't say anything about what we had just seen, end quote. I kind of can understand why they didn't say anything, but I would love to know more about what they did say as to why they were there or just happened to be there when these cows started behaving the way they were and when they did what they did. However, I don't have that information, so we have to move on. The thing is, I wonder if the extraterrestrial or extraterrestrials flying or operating the craft were in the middle of trying to abduct the cows or do some of that crazy mutilation stuff we always see and that I covered about a year ago here on this channel, but were interrupted by the sight of the two friends driving along or the fact that they walked after it after they saw it. Who knows what would have happened had they decided not to follow it? They're lucky they escaped with their lives. I'm 100% convinced that this spaceship, or whatever you want to call it, is how we can better identify what type of extraterrestrials we're dealing with. You know how all countries have all different types of cars, even when they're made by the same companies? I believe it's something like that with the spaceships for the ETs. Like, if you see a certain craft, then you know it's a certain type of entity. So the same as the cars, but with intergalactic travel. Let me know what you all think in the comments below, please, about all of these cases so far, and also about that little tidbit I just gave y'all. In 1979, a man sat on his front porch in Wenatchee, Washington, and watched as a silver triangular aircraft with, quote, no discernible fuselage, no wings or other control devices, end quote, coasted slowly over the top of a bunch of poplar trees that stood at about 150 feet tall. The witness said, quote, a jetliner could not have stayed airborne at such a sedate rate of speed, end quote. He also remembered that the craft was much larger than the Boeing 747. As he watched in awe and somewhat wondered about the physics of how the craft was able to do what it was doing, it headed towards nearby Birch Mountain. He said, quote, my immediate thought was that a monstrous crash was imminent, end quote. However, there wasn't any such crash, and instead the UFO just disappeared into the night. It just disappeared into thin air. Oddly enough, NUFORC vouched for this witness, and they wrote below his report, quote, one of two excellent reports by the same witness. We know this witness and have spoken with him on several occasions. He formerly served in the U.S. military and held a high security clearance, end quote. With that, I ask all of you again, how many times does a former military person have to see something like this or experience a possible abduction before anyone else starts making the connections between the two? I don't pretend to know what those connections are or even what they could be, but it doesn't take a rocket surgeon or a brain scientist to figure out that there are links there that can't and shouldn't be ignored. In 1982, a man in Leicester, England, not sure, woke up in the middle of the night to a very soft illumination in his room. He looked to see where it was coming from, and apparently there was a 4-foot-tall gray creature whose face was producing the soft glow. He said the alien resembled the classic image from the 1977 movie Close Encounters of the Third Kind. The witness, who said he wasn't scared when he noticed the creature, but was instead, quote, overwhelmed with a feeling of calm and peace, end quote, pinched himself several times to make sure he wasn't dreaming or anything like that going on. He scanned the room over and over again, looking for some other explanation than that he was actually in the face of an alien gray that was lighting up his room by just standing there and staring at him. He knew immediately that no one would believe him, so he started nudging his wife, who was next to him, because he wanted her to wake up and bear witness to what he was seeing. However, as soon as his wife opened her eyes, the room went fully dark again and the creature had vanished. The witness said, quote, "Did I imagine or dream the whole thing? Absolutely, 100% no," end quote. He wrote that in his report. So I just wonder in this case what the alien wanted and if it ever returned. I'm pretty sure if it had returned, the man would have written back, but that's not really guaranteed. I wonder though, why was it there and what purpose did it serve? Why that man at that place in that time, and why did it leave as soon as he would have had a witness to it? I don't believe it was a dream, but I do believe there's more to the encounter than the man probably even remembers. Whether that was that he was abducted or not, I honestly don't know, but I do know there's almost no chance that that gray alien was there just to stare at him for a minute or two and leave, disappearing thoroughly into the night the moment his wife woke up. In 1988, 3 friends were on their way home from an INXS concert in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania, when they had their strange experience. So, side note, INXS, wonderful, amazing band, and I hate what happened to the leader, gorgeous and incredible Mr. Michael Hudgens. So, I just had to say that because, I love me some INXS. The friends were driving home along a dark and deserted road, and they saw a ball of light that was sweeping, quote, "a very bright beam of light," end quote, over the darkness. The friends pulled over to the side of the road, and 2 of them got out to get a better look at what the light was and what was going on. The third friend, as it's reported, quote, "remained in the car screaming the whole time," end quote. At first, the pair thought that the light resembled the search beam of a helicopter, but quickly realized that wasn't what they were dealing with. One of the witnesses said, quote, "there was no hint of any craft or body emitting the beam, even when it faced away from us," end quote. And furthermore, they all reported that the whole scene, the whole area, had gone deafeningly silent. As the beam quickly started drawing closer to them, they turned to run and got back into the car. As soon as they were in the car with the doors locked, the beam of light shot up into the sky and vanished into nothingness. As they drove out of there, scared out of their wits and excitedly discussing what they had just witnessed, they said the radio played nothing but static for a while, and then it completely stopped working and went fully silent as well. They only heard a part of one sentence clearly before the radio blinked out and stopped working for good. Quote, "further evidence that there is life on Mars," end quote. So that's pretty crazy. And I wonder if maybe the last sentence or part of it that they had heard was more than mere coincidence. I mean, what are the odds that they would only hear that and nothing else through the intense static? It's up to you to decide, but again, I wonder what it was doing out there in the first place, and would bet that on the same night there was someone abducted who maybe even doesn't even remember it. I'm well aware that aliens don't always abduct human beings, but when speculating, I tend to err on the side of reason, and it's only reasonable to me that they aren't just coming all the way to our planet from wherever they are originally hailing from, just to swing a beam of light around a darkened cornfield or field and disappear. Sometime towards the end of 1991, a guy and his girlfriend went up to a peaceful and scenic spot that overlooked Olympia, Washington, and they said that they were merely parked there so that they could relax and, quote, "talk about life and random things," end quote. Whatever it was that they were doing, they got the shock of their life, apparently, when suddenly they spotted what they thought was an incredibly bright star. The star split violently into a sphere that was composed of about 20 points of light. It was described as being, quote, "something like a Hoberman sphere," end quote. I'm going to look up what that is, but in the meantime, the witness said, quote, "I found out many years later what a Hoberman sphere is, and just about crapped myself the first time I saw one in motion. Its movement looked so similar," end quote, meaning it looked so similar to what he and his girlfriend saw that night. So this thing bursts into the sphere with all of these light points and then rapidly rotated before contracting itself back into one single bright light again. The light then started to glow red and spit out 5 identical glowing red lights. It did so one by one, and each light pulsated in perfect synchronization with the others, and they then formed a straight line and flew up into the night sky and vanished. Also, all at once. The witness actually managed to get some of the event on camera, but it was 1991, and the only thing you can see in this video is, quote, a blank screen with a few strange flickering whitish dots on it that seem to come and go, end quote. The witness wrote, quote, I am, after seeing it, hard-pressed to believe that it's anything of known terrestrial technology, end quote. And the thing I think we should all keep in mind here, guys, is the fact that these two can't be the only ones who saw this thing, so why wasn't it reported on? Like in so many other cases, I wonder why no one ever publicly talks about it. Like, we don't see the news the next day talking about it or anything like that. And for me, that makes it so much more suspicious. The witness also said, quote, I have resigned to the likelihood that I will never know what it was at all, end quote. So before we move on to our next case, according to Wikipedia, a Hoberman sphere is, quote, an isokinetic structure patented by Chuck Hoberman that resembles a geodesic dome, but is capable of folding down to a fraction of its normal size by the scissor-like action of its joints. Colorful plastic versions have become popular as children's toys. Several toy sizes exist, with the original design capable of expanding from 5.9 inches or 15 centimeters in diameter to 30 inches or 76 centimeters, end of quote. It goes on to explain, quote, a Hoberman sphere typically consists of 6 great circles corresponding to the edges of an icosahedron. The Hoberman sphere can be unfolded by allowing certain members to spread apart. The operation of each joint is linked to all of the others in a scissors mechanism that those used to mount pantograph mirrors, or how a folding chair operates. In larger models, this can be accomplished by feeding out a string or cable instead. The largest existing Hoberman sphere is in the AHHAA Science Center in Tartu, Estonia. Fully expanded, it is 5.9 meters or 19 feet in diameter. The motorized sphere weighs 340 kilograms or 750 pounds. Is constructed of aircraft-grade aluminum and continually oscillates between its compact and expanded sizes. The sphere is suspended above the center's science court and is actuated with a computer-based motion control system. The system opens and closes the sphere in a programmed series of lyrical motions choreographed to music, lighting, and special effects. An earlier, similar but slightly smaller Hoberman sphere is in the atrium of Liberty Science Center in Jersey City, New Jersey. The 700-pound or 320-kilogram sphere, when fully expanded, measures 18 feet, so 5.5 meters in diameter. End of quote. Guys, the minute I saw one of these things, I knew exactly what it was. So my editing skills are very low level, as most of y'all know. So go ahead and take a second right now to open another tab and Google it, or just wait until you finish this video and go and check it out. You'll know what it is right away, and then you can kind of put this encounter story, like you can envision it better, because you'll know what the witness is talking about. If you take the picture in your mind of this sphere and imagine what these witnesses said they saw and how they compared that site to it, it's pretty wild. On March 15th, 1995, the NUFORC started to receive tons of calls across dozens of states from witnesses reporting that they had seen or were seeing a bright object flying all across the night sky. This is called the Ides of March sightings, and the first of them to be reported to NUFORC was reported by 2 men in Florida who described the light as, quote, luminous, white, and disc-shaped, end of quote. Subsequent descriptions varied, though, and someone from Tennessee called and said that to him it looked more like, quote, a blue-green cloud of light, end quote, that emitted sparks before vanishing into the night sky. A sergeant from the Missouri State Highway Patrol witnessed the event too, and he reported it being a green light that turned yellow and then went out, quote, like a light being switched off, end quote. That witness also explained that so many people were calling the local 911 in the area and reporting to the dispatchers that they were all seeing the exact same thing as what he had just described, with one of those callers saying that his cell phone and car radio both died when the UFO got too close to the vehicle. Now, it was 1995, and I wondered if there were cell phones back then, or if maybe they meant car phone, just car phone. But either way, I'm not surprised that it interfered with technology like that regardless. There were still other reports that came in of what was seemingly and thought to be the exact same object from Virginia, West Virginia, Missouri, just to name a few other places. The official report summarized the event briefly, very briefly, by saying, quote, in summary, it appears as though one or more egg-shaped objects radiating intensely bright green, blue-green, and yellow light, periodically spewing out a cloud of sparks, streaked over at least 7 states, stopping from time to time, and the whole event occurred in a matter of minutes, end quote. When you have multiple witnesses across multiple states, and some of those witnesses are police officers and other somewhat respected members of society, I ask again, and with even more fervor, why the hell did no one at all address what this was in the paper or on the news of the next day or at all? Probably because our government wanted it swept under the rug like it does with most everything else. Or at least that's my opinion of it. That's my hot take. So this one many of you will have heard before, and I'm talking about the Phoenix Lights. In March of 1997, it was Arizona that played host to an event that NUFORC called, quote, perhaps the most dramatic UFO sighting that's been reported in many years, end quote. Dozens of people from all over the state called into the hotline and reported that they were seeing a group of white or red lights flying in a V formation all across the sky. One man who is said to have flight experience, who allegedly witnessed the event, estimated that the lights were about 1,000 feet from the ground, and multiple other witnesses described the whole event as having happened in complete and total silence. The lights and whatever they were attached to made no noise at all. That makes it highly unlikely, and in my opinion, very improbable that airplanes or any known aircrafts that we would normally see in the sky could have been involved. One of the same observers, and I think it was the guy who was the pilot, the guy with flying experience, or however it referred to him, called in to Luke Air Force Base about the event and was told by the operator that they had received many calls that night about the exact same event, like they were on it. However, according to NUFORC and their records on this particular case, the base later claimed that they had never received any phone calls about it. I have to wonder here, why did this one get so much attention, and the last one we just talked about that had dozens more witnesses, it didn't even blip anyone's radar? Probably because the Air Force was notified and they felt like they needed to at least attempt to do some damage control. The Phoenix Lights received national media attention a few months later, and that's when the military finally offered an explanation. They claimed that the lights were just leftover flares that the Maryland Air National Guard had dropped randomly at the end of another operation they had been conducting that night while in Arizona. Obviously, some still remain unconvinced. I wonder why. That seems so reasonable. At some point in 1999, 3 foresters were planting seedlings in some of Washington's mountains when a wobbly disc-shaped aircraft appeared and gently drifted over to a herd of elk. All of the animals fled in the same direction, keeping close to one another except for one. One of them went in the opposite direction as the others, and the craft positioned itself over the lone elk and beamed it right off the ground and into the air while the stunned forester stood and watched in astonishment. The witnesses said they couldn't see, quote, any visible means of support, end quote, attached to it at all. The UFO was wobbling even more at that time as it was seemingly having some trouble with carrying the weight of the elk, but eventually it rose so high into the sky that they couldn't see it anymore. They merely assumed that the elk had somehow managed to end up inside of the strange aircraft. When the director of NUFORC at the time, a man named Peter Davenport, traveled to Washington to interview the witnesses and to conduct a thorough and proper investigation, he was shown the carcass of a pregnant female elk that had been found only a few miles away from where the men had spotted the UFO in the first place. It had been found deceased. We will probably never know whether or not that pregnant elk was the same one that had been brought up into the craft that day, but many people who are familiar with the case speculate that it was. I don't think it was noticeably pregnant when it was taken, but I couldn't find out one way or another on that either. So I'm not sure if people are insinuating that the animal became pregnant somehow from the abduction and it didn't work out, sort of like the hybrid programs we discuss so much here on this channel, or if it was pregnant all along and it didn't work out. Either way, it didn't work out well for the elk, whether there were 1 or 2 or more involved. Our last insane case that I managed to lift from the official files of NUFORC reports happened in the year 2000 in Lebanon, Illinois at around 4 o'clock in the morning. A police officer named Ed Barton heard a call come through dispatch about a UFO sighting at a neighboring police station. He went outside and just happened to look up, and when he did, he saw the object the person had been calling about for himself, only from a distance. That's how large this thing was. It was allegedly hovering over a neighboring police station in another town. I mean, Granted, the town was nearby enough that he could see it just by looking up, I think, is what was going on here. It was huge regardless. He witnessed two extraordinarily bright lights that seemed to merge into one, even brighter light right before his eyes. He got into his car and sped off in the object's direction until it was almost right over his head. He gave an estimate of how high off the ground it was and ballparked it at an altitude of somewhere between 1,000 and 1,500 feet. It was described as triangular with a light on each corner of it and many more all along the edge. The object abruptly shot through the sky so fast that Barton concluded it couldn't have been created by humans. I mean, no crap, right? The speed alone, but the silence and how high it was hovering, not to mention how huge it was, kind of gave it away for me. Many other residents in Illinois witnessed the object that night too. Craig Stevens, who was an officer in the town of Millstadt, said he thought it was between 1 and 2 stories tall and, quote, perhaps 3 stories long, end quote. A man named Melvin Knoll said it looked to him like it was as big as a house, and he reported, quote, there were big windows about 2.5 feet wide and 5 or 6 feet high, 2 stories on top of each other, end of quote. In 2010, he told the St. Louis Dispatch newspaper, quote, I still believe it was something from another planet, end quote. A spokesman for the Scott Air Force Base, which was very close to where the sightings happened, said that the radars were all turned off at the time and no one had seen the UFO. Other reports allege, of course, that the government was directly involved in this one. The NUFORC received one report that came from what they called, quote, a highly reliable source, end quote, that said that the National Guard jets, quote, may have been scrambled to take a look at the object, end quote. Several other people also told NUFORC that federal government employees had visited the local police department and witnesses who were regular citizens and asked that they all, quote, curtail all their statements to the press, end quote. Well, I find nothing about that too hard to believe. That's all I have for you today, guys. Please give this video a big thumbs up if you enjoyed the content, if you enjoyed hanging out with me, and if you enjoyed hanging out with one another in the premiere. As most of you know, or at least those of you that attend Live Intuitive Oracle, so this upload comes at 11 a.m. Eastern Time on Monday mornings, and the members only video comes at noon on Monday mornings. But what I'm going to be doing with the members only videos is they're going to come at noon Eastern on Monday mornings, and for 24 hours they will be fully public because I don't have enough members to, even if they were to all watch the video, my view on that video would be so low it would drag my algorithm right down. I'm getting tongue-tied because I've been sitting here for a while filming this. Check out the description box for some important links, ways to donate to the channel, PayPal, Cash App, my Amazon wish list gift link, links to all 4 of my books on Kindle and paperback on Amazon will be in the description box. My book, Danger at Your Door, Encounters with the Black-Eyed Kids, released fully on January 3rd. So the Wednesday before you guys are watching this, if you're watching the premiere. I'm really excited about it, guys. So please, if you want an autographed copy, email me, or if you have my number, text me, and I will get that right out to you. If you read the book, whether it be on Kindle or paperback, and you enjoy it, please leave a positive review. Those things really do help. And if you don't have my other books, consider buying them. So the first one is Missing the Faith Theory. Book 2, Encounters with Evil, 101 True and Terrifying Stories. And Book 3, Shadow Entities, Sleep Paralysis, and Beyond, which was just released last November, so November of 2022. So I guess that's not last November. 2 Novembers ago right now, because it's January of 24 when I'm filming. So the schedule for the week, which is mainly the schedule for most weeks, you know, things do show up, things do happen from time to time, but I try to keep you all informed about what's going on with the schedule for the week and what's coming up the week before and all these other things. I try to keep you well informed through shorts. So please watch the shorts, continue supporting the shorts. They're a minute long, sometimes even 15 seconds. I mean, I don't think it's going to hurt you guys to watch them and show your support of me if you really care about doing so, and you can find the time. The schedule, though, like I was saying, will be posted in the description box, just like it is in all my other videos. Be kind to each other, guys. It doesn't cost anything. Be kind to yourselves and never accept anything less than others being kind to you. If no one told you today, you're fantastic. You're amazing. 2024 is your most prosperous year yet. All you have to do is put in the work, and the universe will work with you to manifest even what you see as your most wildest dreams, wishes, and desires. I got your back. I'm rooting for you. If you need anything, or if you want to send in any encounters of your own with the supernatural, paranormal, extraterrestrial, or otherworldly for listener encounters, please do so, and send any other correspondence, including if you want a signed copy of any of my books, to GemmaJadeParanormal@gmail.com. Until then, always go in grace, smile at a stranger, and I'll see you guys next time. Bye.